Does hell actually save us from heaven? What if everything that you were told about heaven and hell were wrong? We're going to take a look at this today. It's very interesting because we've been talking about concepts lately about how there's an exoteric version of religion and then an esoteric version, a version that people just take literally, and then the secret message behind the symbols and metaphors used. So we're going to be taking a look at what heaven and hell really are when looked at from this perspective of understanding the hidden message behind religion and the stories like this. So we're going to do this, and this takes a little bit of, if you're not used to this sort of thing, you may be thinking at first like, where are you going with this? What the hell does that mean? Get it? What the hell does that mean? Because we're talking about hell. Anyway, just go with it, and it'll make sense. At first, it might be, a little confusing as to where this is going, but by the end of it, it'll all make sense, and we'll see that hell and heaven are actually completely different than what one is told in mainstream religions. So, I'm going to start by bringing up a transcript of a video on Big Think. Now, this is called from Bishop Barron's. This is a bishop talking, and it's titled, "Why This Bishop Hopes That Hell is Empty." So let's just start reading, jump into this, and I will explain how this all connects, how this all fits together. So you're told usually, right, if you're part of a mainstream religion, what is hell? Hell is an eternal torment in the lake of fire. That is the general idea of what hell is. It's a fiery place where you are tortured and burned for eternity. It's where sinners go, those who are not saved. And that's the general idea of what hell is. So let's take a closer look, though. So this is Bishop Barron talking. So Bishop Barron says hell is a corollary of two more fundamental teachings, namely that God is love and that we're free, which means we can respond to that love. We can incorporate that love. We can hook ourselves onto it, or we can resist it. And hell would be the permanent and eternal absolute no to God. If you're at a party, there's a party swirling around you, everyone's having a great time. Well, hold on. Before we get into this weird party metaphor here, I want to show. So now this bishop we're looking at a more nuanced interpretation of hell here. So where hell is usually envisioned as this lake of fire where you're burned and tortured for eternity, Bishop is saying that we are saying that God is love, and what hell is the eternal and absolute rejection of God and saying no to God. And since God is love, it's this eternal saying no to love. But again, we're going to tie this all together. It's going to sound a little weird at first, but the pieces will fall into place. So I grew up a devout Christian. I was indoctrinated into Christianity. I have religious trauma syndrome, RTS. People who watch my channel know all about that. So I was originally taught the idea that hell was a burning lake of fire, that if you're a sinner, you go there, you're burned for eternity. However, later in my teenage years, I was taught that, well, maybe we got that wrong. Maybe what it is that hell is not necessarily burning in a lake of fire, literally, but eternal separation from God. Now, this doesn't really make it any better, because you're still told that it's the absolute worst torment you can possibly imagine for eternity. But you can see a little bit of a transition here, where it's going from this literalist interpretation of being burned and tortured forever in hell, to this idea that hell may not literally be that, but it has something to do with a separation from God. So let's just keep that in mind and keep reading here, and we'll see how this all fits in. So the Bishop Barron is using this party metaphor. He's saying, imagine you're at a party, people are having a great time, there's music, there's good food, everyone's laughing, but you're in the worst mood of your life. The party is increasing your suffering. If you were by yourself, you wouldn't suffer as much as you would in that party. Well, I certainly can relate to that. I prefer to be by myself than parties. Anyway, well, see, hell would be like that. The Bible's very... Gee, thanks. Well, going to a party as an introvert, I think, is a very good depiction of hell. So, the Bible's very clear on the existence of hell. Well, some time ago, I did a video where I suggested that we may hope that all people be saved. Now, I didn't say that I know that all people are saved. I didn't say, no problem, don't worry about it. I said, we may hope. And I must say, I was very surprised at the vehement of the reaction of some people who seem to be very enthusiastic about a populated hell. Again, this will fit together once we get through this a bit. The position I take is a kind of middle ground between saying, well, obviously everyone goes to heaven, and, well, no, obviously there's lots and lots of, or most people in hell. Mine, I think, is a middle position. So what are arguments for a crowded hell? Well, look around us. I mean, that's easy in a way. There's plenty of wickedness to go around. And so we can say that Hitler and Stalin are the real limited cases. But come on, look around and look in. So the reason why I'm bringing this up is because this bishop has a more nuanced interpretation of heaven and hell. But it's still shallow in such a way, such as, if you're a bad person, you're going to go to hell. If you're a Hitler or a Stalin, you're going to go to hell. But I want to show that there's a move from taking things completely literally at face value to start to see the esoteric meaning behind it. So, well, the Bible says there's no man righteous, no, not one. So that's easy in a way. That, yeah, if I just look at human achievement and morally speaking, I'd say most of us would go to hell. What's the counter argument? God and God's love and God's mercy. And more to it, what God has accomplished in Christ. The Father sent the Son where? Into our sin. And this is not very long. This just goes to here. But I want to get this part done so that I can go back and show you what this all means. So, where did the Father send the Son? Jesus. Into our sins so that he could, in principle, carry everybody back to the Father. So yes, I look around and what do I see? People destined for hell. Jesus himself said that the road to perdition is wide and most taken. And yeah, sure, that's true, but that same Jesus went to the end of that road so that as we run away from the Father, we're running up into the arms of the Son. Are we ready for intimacy with God, which is what heaven means? That's another important part, okay? So log that away. Are we ready for intimacy with God, which is what heaven means? So what is heaven? Intimacy with God. What is God? God is love. What is hell? The rejection of love and intimacy. This will tie in. So, well, not until we've purged selfishness, cruelty, and different forms of wickedness from our lives. So he's essentially saying that we cannot achieve intimacy with God, which is heaven, until we've purged these sins, such as selfishness, from our lives. So we require, therefore, the school of souls, this purgative process by which we're readied for love. Might this take place even after we die? Let's face it, in this life, it's not the case that the best people get rewarded and the most wicked people are punished. I mean, sometimes, but not always. Right? There's a lot of terrible people who look at the billionaires who get quite a lot of good things, but they're mostly very terrible people. And so people, I think, very naturally have said, no, there must be some realm where things are set right, where a God who is a God of justice sets things right. Now, is anyone in the state of hell permanent, everlasting rejection of God? Well, we don't know. Purgatory, a place of purification, where imperfections are burned away, where things are set right. Might we hope for that? Hope for that even for all people. We may hope, but I don't know it. I don't claim to know. To claim to know is to fall into heresy. I'm not going to do that. No, come on, be a heretic. But I may hope. Given the acrobatic display of God's love in Christ, I may hope that all people are saved. So this individual is hoping that all people are saved rather than many people going to hell. So let's break this down. And this is a really good example of seeing how things can be taken literally, but then interpreted as the hidden meaning behind it. So we have God as love. We have heaven as intimacy with God, or intimacy with love. We have hell as being the rejection of God, or separation from God. And then we have that one cannot enter into heaven or intimacy with God without the purification of things like selfishness. So let's break this down and see what this really means. So when it comes down to it, the idea basically here is that God is love and hell is separation from God. So if we understand things in terms of Hyperianism and what we know about the nature of reality, we can look at love as meaning unity and hell as being separation from unity. So you see how you have a unified perfection, which you could call perfect love or perfect God, which would be unified perfection, and then hell being the absolute separation from that unity and perfection. So what happens here is that when you have this idea of hell as being eternal separation from God, hold on, let me bring that article back up for me. Okay, so what do we want to do? What are we trying to do? Now, it's really hard to, this is why I don't like using religious language, because it really makes things obscure and foggy. What we want to do is get rid of this religious language and see what reality really is in itself. So what are we doing? What's the purpose of life? The purpose of life is to grow, actualize, become. And what are we doing when we do all this? We are realizing what we are, and we are creating more unity. The more unity that we create, the more God-like we become, because we are God. So we can see that separation and unity are this idea of what happens when there's separation. Well, look at the world. When we have separation and division, this leads to hatred, racism, homophobia, sexism, all sorts of things, because it's difference, separation. Unity is not there. Oh, you are other. I hate you because you are different. You are other. And so you have this separation. And so separation is what creates a hellish environment. But what we really need to look at, because the title of this video, Can Hell Actually Save Us from Heaven? Because when we look at these things objectively, we don't really want to add, this is why you have to really understand that religion obscures everything. What we really have, rather than heaven and hell, what we really just have is unity and separation. And neither of them are inherently good or bad. They are just states of being. Right now, we're in a middle ground. We're not in complete separation, but we're not in complete unity either. We're much closer to separation. We're a very divided humanity. We're a lot closer to separation. Now, we want to increase our unity, because as we increase our unity, we start to live a better life. And this is why in Hyperianism, we're not trying to go to hell after we die or something like that. We want to create heaven on earth, in that we want to create a world that reflects that inner unity, that we know that we're all connected, so we can build a world together. And this is what they talk about in the Gospel of Thomas, that Gnostic gospel that's basically, omitted from the Bible, where Jesus talks about how you can become God and the kingdom of heaven is all around you. You just have to be able to know that it is there. But what we want to do is actually build that and actualize it. So you have this idea of eternal unity, and then you have not eternal unity, but you have this idea of unity and separation. And what we want to do is move closer and closer and closer to unity. Now, as we move closer and closer to unity, you could say we're becoming more perfect, and you could also say we're increasing love. One could say that. If we want to, it depends what sort of wording that we're using. And so someone that rejects unity, that throws themselves in total separation, is going to be in that hellish state, because they are completely cut off from. Do you see how, if we're creating a more unified society where we understand what we are, where we are, why we are here, and we begin to learn and grow and actualize together. Someone that cuts themselves off from all that and is selfish and denies that, that will be hell because of the rejection of unity, because they have entered into separation. They have separated themselves off from what we are, this unified whole. So what we're doing here is, as we grow, learn, evolve, we create a planetary civilization, we're creating more and more unity, more synchronization, increasing quality of life, increasing all these different factors, and getting more and more unified. So if we fast forward all the way to the end of time is the state of perfect and total unity. And so you could say, again, using religious language, that is unification with God. But we are God, so we are self-unified, and we've realized our own unity and come together as a unity. A total and complete, perfect unity. So at the end of time, the complete end of time, when we have done everything and become maximally synchronized and maximally in harmony, we have entered into a state that is in perfect unity, perfect harmony, where there is no separation whatsoever. Now imagine that. That is a state of utter perfection. And that will be a fantastic state because it's perfect. It's totally unified. It's perfect, total unity. And one could call that heaven if they wanted to. I don't like religious language, but you can see when we're talking in terms of these stories and analogies, this form of perfect unity is, what one would call heaven in biblical terms, because it is unity with God. And when one has purged themselves of selfishness or sin, they achieve that. They are able to achieve unity. Because if you're just completely and totally selfish, you can't work together in a cohesive unity. So at the end of time, it's perfect unity. But imagine that for a moment. When in a state of perfect unity, there's no separation at all. And when there's no separation at all, it's just a blank experience. The only thing that allows us to have any sort of experience whatsoever is difference. Separation and difference go hand in hand. Separation and difference is what allows us to experience everything. Our separateness, I am here and you are over there. This tree is not there. It's, outside and across the street. This is green and not blue. Separation and difference all go hand in hand. So when perfect unity is achieved, there is no separation. There is no difference. And it's just that state of total unity and all there is. There is not even that experience of otherness. We are all totally one and identical. Now, that state, if that were to last, that would turn into a tortuous state. You don't want to be there forever. Imagine if you were in that state, you would go mad. It would be terrible. It would be tortuous. So what happens is that we then enter into a state of separation. And that, of course, is the beginning of the space-time domain. Because once you introduce separation, you introduce difference. Once you introduce difference, you can have extension. And extension gives rise to all the material objects and everything around you. So separation is what gives rise to us being able to have an experience of otherness. So having a separation is not necessarily intrinsically bad or horrible. So this separation from God or separation from unity is what saves us for an endless, eternal, everlasting unity, which would it be absolutely tortuous. So if we think of the idea of hell as separation from God or separation from unity, that is actually what saves us from an eternal heaven, which would actually be an eternal torment if that were allowed to go on forever. So if we look at the idea of if we look at the esoteric interpretations of heaven and hell, which heaven is perfect harmony and perfect unity, and hell is separation and the rejection of that unity. Right now, we want to work towards unity because we're very, very, very far from unity. And the more unity that we increase, the better experience we have, the better quality of life that we can have. So right now we want to increase our unity. But separation also exists as a fundamental part of nature and reality so that we can have separate experiences together. So if that separation didn't exist, we would be thrown into this eternal torment. So it's actually that idea of, when we have the esoteric interpretation of what heaven and hell is, hell being rejection of God and God being unity, that is what allows us to experience a domain of separateness. But that's why it's so hellish at first, this domain of separateness, where we don't understand what we are, right? We don't know that we are this unity underneath it all. We don't know that. So the world is very hellish because we're very divided and extremely separated. The more separateness that exists, the more hellish of a state there is, in that, we have war and bloodshed and division and hatred and all that. But as we increase our unity, but can still experience each other in diversity and separateness, this is what allows us to have a great experience in life, because we're still able to experience each other in separateness, but knowing underneath it all that we are an underlying unity. It's kind of like knowing that we're all playing a video game, but underneath it all, we're all connected via the code. You can still enjoy the game and have fun. And now that you know that it's a game, you can stop, harming each other and build a better game with the knowledge of what the game is. So that's the idea. And if you take a look at this, you can see where it's, they're taking an exoteric interpretation, but you can see this bishop is kind of sort of getting close to an esoteric interpretation, where the bishop is saying that God is love and that hell is the no to God, the rejection of love. And if we look at that as what it really is a unity, and the rejection of unity, which is separation, that is a division. So the reason why we live in a hellish world right now is because of that separateness. But it's not intrinsically a bad thing. Separateness is what allows us to have an experience of diversity. So it's good that it exists. And if it didn't exist, we would just be in an eternal realm of no difference whatsoever. And that would be absolutely tortuous. So this is why it's really important to understand that behind these religious stories are esoteric ideas. And this is why we need to drop this picture thinking, what Hegel called Vorstellung, which is a understanding of reality through stories and metaphors, and start to rationally really understand what reality is. Or at the very least, acknowledge that these stories are just stories and they're metaphors. Because if you don't, if you don't take a look at that, and what is Jesus, by the way? But what Jesus is telling you that you can be like God. You can become God. The idea of Jesus is, what's Jesus all about? The whole part about Jesus is that Jesus is God in man, God in humanity. That's the whole, the esoteric meaning of Jesus Christ is that God is man, humanity, meaning man. And because of that, we are divine. And we just have to realize that divinity and then create the kingdom of heaven here and now. But you see, if you take the literal interpretation of Christianity, well, now you're on your knees praying to a zombie wizard so that you don't get sent to the fire pit if you masturbate too much or whatever. It becomes absolute insanity. So we have to get away from these literalist interpretations of religion and acknowledge that these interpretations are merely analogies for an underlying meaning. And when you start understanding this and reading those stories, you can start to see that stuff everywhere. Because when you look at Satan, who is, the prince of hell, well, what does Satan mean? Satan means adversary. What is adversary? One who opposes. So Satan, the ruler of hell, is the adversary, the opposer, the other. And that's precisely what allows there to be, esoterically understanding it, that is separation. Satan is the archetypal force of separation, being the adversary to God, unity. So Satan is the archetypal force of separation. God is that archetypal force of unity. But so you have to understand it esoterically and see the hidden meaning behind it, or else you start to get to, believing crazy things. And so really what happens is that hell is what saves us from heaven, and heaven is what saves us from hell. Because we're in this dialectical synthesis and dialectical evolution of the interplay of the forces of unity and separation. And right now we're really on the we're way too close to the separation pole, and we need to move that towards unity so that we can understand that we don't need to hate each other because of our differences and what makes us separate, but realize that we're united underneath it all, and that we aren't actually separate. It's just an illusion of separateness, and then be able to learn and understand and grow in understanding our diversity. So I really want to hammer it in. Hell does, as described in the Bible, literally doesn't exist. That's a huge part of religious trauma syndrome, is the fear of hell. That lasted for such a long time for me. That does not exist. The idea of heaven and hell, as described in the Bible, are ridiculous. They're false. They defy logic. You can know for sure that they don't exist. These religious stories are just stories and metaphors that have gotten distorted over the years, and that people have taken literally, and people have changed them to as forms of controlling the population. So much negativity has come from that. But underneath it, what originally we had is stories and metaphors that represented underlying archetypal forces. So we have to ditch the picture thinking, ditch religion, get to being able to understand really reality for what it is, and understand that these are just stories, and they might be fun, and they might be interesting to draw analogies to and comparisons. But as long as one realizes that they are absolutely metaphorical and absolutely, just analogies, they are not literal. So, don't worry about the idea that, you're going to go to hell, or that, you have to be a good person to get to heaven. All that is bullshit. We are the creators of this reality, and we are the forces of unity and separation ourselves. We are light and dark. We are heaven and hell, and we can create whatever we so will. And what we want to do is create a unified society where we are enjoying ourselves and creating a higher quality of life for every individual in the collective, having meaningful experiences, evolving and growing. And eventually we'll reach that state of perfect and total perfection where there is no difference whatsoever. And then thankfully we can enter into a state of separation once again, where we can experience each other again through difference, and have that. It's like once you beat the video game, you can start a new video game and play it again because you've beaten the game. But once you know it's a game, it's fun, and you can. Right now, people are struggling and there's so much suffering. But when you realize what reality is, and that it's a lot like a game, you can make the game better and start to have fun playing it, rather than it being this life and death struggle for survival. It can be this unified planetary civilization of thriving, having full, meaningful experiences, learning and growing. So anyone tells you that that heaven actually exists, or that you have to be a good person, or pray to Jesus or else you're going to go to hell, that's bullshit. Don't believe that. That's a load of crap. Right? We are the creators of this reality. We are all that is. We are the absolute, and we have that power within us to create a perfect, unified society. And we can create that world where, or not even if it's perfect, but at least a world where we are knowing that we are unified underneath it all, so we can grow, learn, actualize, and evolve. So I have a lot more videos on my channel regarding, esoteric interpretations of Christianity. Check out my playlist on the Gospel of Thomas if you want to check that out. I highly recommend it. It talks about how we are all gods, and that we are the creators. And I really recommend that you check out, if you enjoyed this sort of thing, check out the playlist on the Gospel of Thomas. There's a lot more too as well. And if you enjoy my work, hey, consider supporting on Patreon. I appreciate it very much. That's how I'm able to do my work, make my live streams, have a roof over my head, all that stuff. And you get access to our secret live streams. We're having one right after this. You get access to our Discord server, the Citadel, and a lot more. Helps out a lot. I really appreciate it. The link will pop up right over here. And I want to give a big shout out to those who do support on Patreon, especially Zach, Renaissance Fairy, Cassidy, Michael, Angela, Maria, Top of the World, Ethan, DB, Storm, and everyone else as well. Thank you, my friends. I appreciate it very much.